She said yes. In Chicago at the DNC, Kamala Harris stood in front of the crowd on Thursday night and said, I accept your nomination for President of the United States. She said, now it's our turn. She promised to be a president for all Americans, and she promised that you can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
Our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward.
She told the arena and the country that she'll put country above party and self, adding that she will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations. Senator Elizabeth Warren was part of the speaking program on Thursday night, and the ovation that she got from the crowd was really attention-getting. It didn't last 5, 10, 20 seconds. It lasted over a minute. She was emotionally touched by it. The crowd was clearly emotionally touched by seeing her. Of course, in 2020, she ran for president. She unsuccessfully ran for president, but nonetheless, she ran for president. So right now, it is Harris Walz out of the convention. It is closed, making a sprint to November 5th and the general election. Ben and Charmin, back to you.
Our Ed Harding with great coverage all week from Chicago. We have a lot to get to with the Sunday Roundtable. Joining us this morning, Boston Globe columnist and associate editor Adrian Walker and Republican political analyst Lizzie Guyton. Thank you both for being with us this morning. All right, you heard what Mike Capuano had to say. Let's get your take on Kamala Harris and the DNC speech. Adrian, we'll start with you.
Terrific speech. She did the two things she needed to do. She introduced herself to the American people, and she kept the base pumped up.
Lizzie?
She has had a good run. This was a moment for her to define a little bit more detail of what type of president she was going to be, but we still only heard from her behind a teleprompter. She's now the candidate for president for the United States for the Democratic Party, and she should sit down and have a tough interview and talk about her record and talk about the issues and take questions from reporters.
It's been like this for weeks.
She's committed to one interview.
So we asked Mike Capuano about that, and he said a convention speech is not the place for the nitty-gritty. It's where you kind of do these broad brushstrokes and grand themes, but she does need to answer some questions, right?
Well, let's back up. Okay, what she did at the convention is what you do at conventions, and I think she did what she should have done. Yes, she needs to sit down and do an interview, but I mean, these are different questions.
Lizzie?
Yeah, but we now have a debate coming up on September 10th. She's only committed to sit down and do one interview before then. How many is she going to do between now and the election? Are we only going to hear from her when she's behind a teleprompter talking about issues that she wants to talk about?
Was there something she could have addressed that maybe she didn't, do you think, Lizzie?
I mean, she's not talking about a lot about her 4 years that she's been the vice president, where we've had inflation, where we've had a lot of economic uncertainty, where we've had a border crisis. She's talking about it as if she hasn't been responsible for that. And she has. She is the other half of the Biden-Harris administration that's been there for 4 years.
Adrian,
I strongly disagree. I think she talked about a lot. And in fact, the thing she talked about on Thursday night that I was surprised by, she talked a lot more about Gaza than I thought she would. But I thought she covered a lot of ground in that speech.
But she's also contradicted herself quite a bit. I mean, now she's talking about how she's going to be tough on the border, how she's going to be more in the center. That is contrary from what her record has shown today.
Well, she wants to, let's be honest, she does want to have her cake and eat it too, because she wants to be the change candidate, the young candidate. But at the same time, she also does want to say for voters out there who might be a little unknown with her background, say, listen, I've been here, I've been close to these decisions, I've been involved in these decisions for 4 years, right? She's got to kind of navigate that line.
Yeah, there are a lot of things you have to do, and I don't think you can do them all in 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the Trump-Vance campaign. Trump has struggled to adjust to Harris. Republicans want him to stick to policy. They say that's how he can win, but you know how that goes. He went back to the southern border last week. Republicans do need independents. They need swing state voters to win. Can Trump still get them, or is that ship sailing? I want to ask you, Adrian.
No, I don't think he's ever been good at expanding his appeal. I think he has a base, and they love him, and they'll always be with him. But I don't think he's ever been good at appealing to voters beyond that.
What do you think?
He does need to talk about the issues. It was smart for him to go back to the border. I mean, you heard what Congressman Capuano said. I think it's great. Democrats love that he's just spending his time attacking Harris because it allows to not talk about the issues. He should be talking about the issues. He should be talking about the things that Americans have said they're concerned about in this country, and he needs to get the dialogue back there.
You've been saying that for weeks. that he needs to focus on that.
He needs to focus on the things that are keeping people up at night, the problems that people have around their kitchen tables, and it's housing, it's the border, it's national security, it's inflation, and not talking about identity politics.
Who has more at stake now for the September 10th debate? Do you think Trump or Harris? What do you think, Adrian?
I think Harris still has more at stake in the September 10th debate. She's still the person Americans are getting their heads around and getting to know.
I agree. She needs to introduce herself and continue to talk more about why she deserves to get people's vote for the job. Trump is very much a known entity, and she's still very much trying to get her voice out to the people.
Massachusetts Democrats had their time in the limelight at this DNC convention. Governor Maura Healey had a speaking slot. It wasn't very long, a couple of minutes out there, but she was on the final night, the big night of the convention. The switch to Kamala Harris from Joe Biden, has it had a major impact? Would a Harris administration look here to bolster its ranks, or is, how blue we are, deep blue, not exactly the right color scheme? Is she going to pull more from places like those swing states, Pennsylvania?
No, historically, Democratic presidents have drawn from Massachusetts, and I wouldn't be surprised to see President Harris do the same thing.
We know Joe Biden has fond connections with Massachusetts. Do you think it's possible that Harris could have a stronger forge with the state?
I think that she will continue to have strong relationships. There's always a Massachusetts connection. We've seen that play out over time. But I think right now we shouldn't be talking about the cabinet choices that are going to be coming after the election's over. We should be talking about the issues of the campaign.
We're still going to talk about a little bit of speculation. Let's bring up Marty Walsh, the former Boston mayor, former Secretary of Labor. He was tight with Biden, but he's also tight with Kamala Harris. Could he be back in play here in Washington, Lizzie?
Yeah, he is known for having a relationship with Kamala Harris and for being close with her. I think that having his name out there is actually really helpful because Mayor Walsh has a history of working across the aisle, of having a collaborative relationship. I know that well from my time working with Charlie Baker and what that did for Massachusetts, and that's a good thing for where they're at in their campaign right now.
What do you think, Adrian?
I don't think we'll see him in an administration. I think what Mayor Walsh has learned is that you can be a player without being in an administration, and I think that's the path he'll take.
All right, the Stewart Hospital mess did not go away while everybody was partying it up in Chicago. The landlord of St. Elizabeth's Medical Center, Apollo, is now fighting Governor Healey's plan to seize that property by eminent domain. They say the valuation is way under. She's offered $4.5 million. They say it's dozens or hundreds of millions of dollars for that parcel in Brighton. It could lead, $200 million. It could lead to a long legal fight ahead, and we are still waiting to see if the sale of the 5 other Stewart hospitals will go through. Lizzie, I want to start with you here. This isn't going away.
This is a mess, but I think it also speaks to the challenges of the moment. Stewart ran through every stop sign. They haven't been forthcoming with information. And despite this being front page news for a long time now, the legislature still didn't pass any reforms recently to change the way that things are so that this doesn't happen again.
There are people that say the governor could be doing more here. And if she's going to seize St. Elizabeth's, why isn't she doing more to keep Kearney and Neshoba Valley open? There's still questions about Norwood Hospital. Has she done enough?
I think that you're seeing the Healey administration intervene and put a lot of effort into this. I think anytime you're talking about closing a community hospital, that's really challenging for people. People don't want their care options taken away. They don't want to worry about not being able to see their doctors, having to worry about not having access to services. This is really speaking to a general problem we have right now in our healthcare system.
Has she done enough, Adrian?
No, I don't think so. But I will agree that it's a very complicated problem. I don't think anybody's got the silver bullet for what she should do about Stewart. But as somebody who lives in Dorchester, I can tell you people are up in arms about the potential closing of the Kearney and wish that it was somehow more of a part of this plan.
All right, back with the roundtable after this.